Blog Talk Radio.
You know, every time I speak, I want the truth to come out. You know what I'm saying? Every time I speak, I want to shiver. You know, I don't want them to be like, they know what I'm going to say because it's polite. They know what I'm going to say. And even if I get in trouble, you know what I'm saying? That what we're supposed to do? I'm not saying I'm going to rule the world or I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world.
Welcome to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. I had just a little technical difficulty. I didn't know if y'all could hear me. I think I got in the studio just fine. Let me double-check that I didn't play my intro, so work with me. The board wasn't showing me that I was live, so work with me. Let's go to our intro we use from time to time, and we'll get our guest on right after this intro. So, again, bear with me. Working through the computer problems.
Anybody know who Willie Lynch was? Anybody? Raise your hand. He was a vicious slave owner in the West Indies. The slave masters in the colony of Virginia were having trouble controlling their slaves, so they sent for Mr. Lynch to teach them his methods. Keep the slave physically strong, but psychologically weak and dependent on the slave master. Keep the body, take the mind. I and every other professor on this campus are here to help you to find, take back, and keep your righteous mind.
I am your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, and welcome to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. We are the return of intelligent radio as we ensure the free flow of opinions and push the envelope on the questions America's afraid to ask in the mainstream media. Good morning to all the truth seekers out there. I also have my special guest co-host, Latrice Ross, on the line with me, as well as special guest Eli Marcus. Thank y'all for being with me this morning. My board didn't show me I was live, or I thought y'all wasn't on either, so I was a little scared there for a split second, but we got everything working. So if y'all will, Latrice, we'll start with you, Queen, if you will say hello to the truth seekers and hello to our special guest, Eli Marcus, this morning. And thank you for co-hosting with me this morning.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have. And good morning to you, Eli.
Eli, you with us, King?
Yes, I am. Good morning. This is Eli Marcus. I'm happy to be a part of the discussion.
Absolutely. If you will, Eli, again, you've been with the Mental Dialogue Talk Show before, and I want to bring back your perspective on this morning's discussion question. Before we do that, if you will, give the truth seekers just a little bit of your background so they know a little bit of who you are before we go into this morning's discussion question. Again, thanks for being with us, King.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a writer. I enjoy discussing social issues. I enjoy discussing social concepts, masculinity, femininity. I'm an advocate for the institution of the black family. I'm also in the tech industry.
Hey, love it, King. Short and sweet, but perfect for this morning's discussion. As I always like to tell the truth seekers, try to bring people on the show who are a little smarter than myself based on the topic that we are discussing. Let's go ahead and jump into this morning's discussion question, which is very simple. Toxic masculinity, real or BS? Toxic masculinity, real or BS? And we are not a politically correct show, so I'll actually be a little crude to say toxic masculinity, real or bullshit. So we'll figure out which one it is this morning. Again, thank you for being with us, King. And if you will, Latrice, again, you're co-hosting with us, but you also have a significant background as it relates to this morning's discussion. So if you would just kind of mention that briefly, so again, people understand. Obviously, I'll be navigating in this discussion, but again, I want people to understand where you're coming from too when you're offering your perspective, if you will, Queen.
Okay. I am a diversity and inclusion professional. I consult on matters related to assisting corporations with creating strategies to not just make their corporate cultures more diverse, but more importantly, to make it more inclusive. So I've done a lot of research into matters related to diversity, and diversity includes me being an ally for women, an ally for men, for different races, ethnic groups, sexual orientations. And one of the things that I encounter quite frequently is discussions between black men and black women. And I'm frequently quoting stats which highlight my beliefs around this topic, whether toxic masculinity is BS or not. And just to go ahead on and set it off, I don't believe that it's BS. I believe that statistics as it relates to violence in black women show that it's not BS. But not just black women, women in general. But I think part of the issue is that we make the definition of toxic masculinity too broad. It's a very specific, true definition, and I think if we were all to abide by that true definition, we would not perhaps be having this conversation. There would be more a level of understanding as it related to this topic.
Nah, fair enough, and that's what we do here. If you're a first-time listener on the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, I'm going to go ahead and warn y'all, especially if you're a first-time listener, my true seekers that are constantly listening, they understand our process here. But I will tell you again, if you are a first-time listener, I always tell people, and the warning is, you will only hear what you want to hear half the time. What we attempt to do with any discussion is bring both sides of any issue to the table and have a real dialogue, a chance for critical thinking, to get into the nuance of a discussion. What we don't do, in a sense, in conducting these discussions or these dialogues, is we're not going to necessarily be yelling beliefs at each other. We definitely bring people who bring, their side reasonably to both sides of the table. Now, for you, the audience, if you're passionate about your side of it and we just got it dead wrong, please be willing to call in, and we will accept that passion. Again, we definitely understand some of these issues can be very passionate. So we do accept that passion, but just understand our goal is to basically be willing to hear what the other side has to say. And I felt like this was definitely the type of discussion and subject that I wanted to kind of put that out up front. Again, we want to get into the nuance. We want to try to hear what the other side says. And again, if you disagree with myself or any of my guests, we will open up the phone lines. And because I think this is the type of topic that will bring, in a sense, that type of energy per se. With that said, Eli, we'll let you, Latrice said she set it off and gave her perspective. We'll let you give your initial perspective on this morning's discussion. Toxic masculinity, real or BS? Your thoughts, King?
Well, sir, I and millions of others believe that the term toxic masculinity is indeed BS. That's not to say abuse does not happen to women, children, or men, but we believe it's BS. We believe it is a social construct created by white men and white liberals that has also been borrowed by black writers. And as you can see, it's now a term. Black men are now the face of toxic masculinity on almost a national level. And that's the problem with these highly subjective terms that are not clear in definition, that it can be applied to anyone. And then when scholars and writers use this term, the term can be redefined. Every year is redefined. Now I hear that the way men sit, if they're sitting and taking up too much space, that can be considered toxic masculinity. Speaking with too much bass in your voice could be considered toxic masculinity. Not crying frequently. So when we look at terms like that, we have to be very careful. We can care about the abuse of women, children, and men without inventing these wild, cartoonish-like terms that is solely invented to target black men and to demonize and criminalize them.
Nah, thank you for your thoughts, King, and thank you as well, Latrice. We've got about a minute before we go to our initial break, and we'll come out of the break and get hot and heavy into the discussion. I think what both of you had to say, if I could say this, I think you're bringing something to the table that everybody can listen to. As I heard Latrice say, to a certain extent, the topic, and I think this, where I hear a little similarity is that the term itself is too broad, and if we understood the definition, that in a sense might change things. And then I hear Eli saying, hey, the issue is when these terms come up, that they can be taken and you get derivatives of them that in fact are far from maybe what I'm guessing, Latrice, we'll mention as we come out of this break. Again, we want to get into specifics. I will go ahead and give out the phone number a little earlier than usual because we do want to allow the audience to take place. I got a lot of feedback as I was promoting this show, and I will be sharing a lot of actual Facebook text that I got in reference to this morning show for some people that couldn't get on. So let me go ahead and give the number out, and we'll go to our first initial break. The number to get in this morning is 646-787-1691. You will need to press 1 to let us know you want to speak if you're on the line already. Again, that number is 646-787-1691. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, where all I ask is that you think.
Babe, where did you get that hat and t-shirt? I like that.
Oh, I got this at moneymotivation.com. It's fresh, right?
Yes, and I love the message on it, too. You are the hustle, huh?
That's what the shirt says. I am the hustle. They embody the entrepreneurial spirit, and what I like the most, it's more than a brand. It's a lifestyle for those who want to put in the work and expect to have the finer things in life. I also follow them on Instagram. Check this post out.
If you believe money is the root of all evil, you're using it wrong?
Or how about this one? Excuses make $0 an hour.
I like those. What's their IG?
At moneymotivation.co.
But do they have any ladies' gear?
Yes, you're going to love the clothing line they got for the ladies. Matter of fact, pull up their website, moneymotivation.com, and I'm going to get you a few things so we can both look like money.
Everywhere I go, and everywhere I be. I don't even talk, they still know it's me. Cause I look like money, smell like money, talk like money, walk like.
What about a female rapper? I always felt like, I know you dibbled and dabbled with different artists, other female rappers, but, is that something you feel like?
I never did it because I always thought like I would end up with female rapper and in the business up here. I'm so focused on my business. I gotta be honest with you. She looking good. I'm spending so much money on her photo shoots. I got a couple times.
This is not something that we can ignore. It's not something we can just sweep under the rug as just another disturbing footnote. Because this was not just a lewd conversation. This wasn't just locker room banter. This was a powerful individual speaking freely and openly. The disrespect of our ambitions and intellect, the belief that you can do anything you want to a woman, it is cruel. It's frightening. And the truth is, it hurts. It hurts.
Welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. This morning's discussion question, toxic masculinity, real or BS? My special guest co-host, Latrice Ross, on with me, as well as special guest Eli Marcus. We just heard a cut from rapper Rick Ross on the Breakfast Club. And if you're familiar with the Breakfast Club, they were asking him, why he never had, in a sense, a female rapper, as they said, inside of his, his camp, his music camp or whatever. And he basically says he thought he would mess up and want to have sex with the actual rapper if he had one. So in order to avoid that, he never brought one into his camp. And so I guess the initial question, we'll start with you, Latrice. You also hear some commentary from a young lady saying, hey, this is an issue. So is this an example, is this an example of what we're talking about when we're peeling back this question, toxic masculinity, real or BS? Do you hear this as an example of this morning's discussion? Go ahead, Latrice.
You mean what Rick Ross said? I don't view that as being an example of toxic masculinity. Perhaps a subset of it, because when I think about toxic masculinity in the true definition, it's a description of manhood that's designated, that's defined by violence, sex, status, and aggression. And so in a sense it is playing into that, because he's saying I can't be around women or certain women for an extended length of time without thinking of her as a sexual object. So So I guess then the question is whether that's true to manhood, or is that gendered behavior that we've taught, or that's been sort of socialized in our society. Notice I didn't say community, I said society, because I don't view toxic masculinity. I don't see black men as being the poster children for toxic masculinity. As a matter of fact, when I think toxic masculinity, I think Charlottesville and the white supremacists. Those, when I think toxic masculinity, that's what I see. Now, to that end, there are some behaviors that some black men exhibit that play into that definition, and oftentimes it's because our young men are raised with, you can't show emotion, you're not allowed to cry. The more women that you bed, the more masculine you are, and don't let anybody step to you wrong, or you're not going to be a real man. These are the kinds of behaviors that sometimes young men are raised with, that then they grow up and they begin to exhibit behaviors that can be defined as toxic.
Fair thoughts. Eli, any thoughts to what Latrice had to say, as well as the cut? Again, I'll ask you the same question. Was that an example of what people are now referring to as toxic masculinity? As we also heard the lady respond to what she heard on the Breakfast Club and says, hey, it's very frightening, is kind of what she had to say. So any thoughts from you in reference to that cut, as well as Latrice?
I think I'll take on the same opinion with Latrice regarding that particular cut. I mean, it's kind of weird to me. I think it would be weird to most people that he can't work with a female artist because he might have sex with her. Nonetheless, people tend to abuse their power depending on their access and their power position. As it relates to the data regarding men growing up with hyperaggression or violence or sexually aggressive, I don't think there's any data to prove that there's enough men who engage in unhealthy, predatory, abusive behaviors to constitute and to justify a general definition like toxic masculinity. We know that 99.9% of men live healthy, normal, nonviolent lives. Men are historically not violent. Men historically have protected women. Men have historically built society and communities and systems and infrastructures to protect and provide for women. And I think it's truly disrespectful to the history of men, to their women, to feed into this propaganda of toxic masculinity, like as if there's this big issue. We as a society, men and women, are against violence. We're against violent men. We're against violent women. That's why we have prison systems. That's why we have a justice system. That's why when a rape does occur or a man does display hyperaggression, we have police officers that can be called, which often are men. Judges are often men. And we punish people who engage in unhealthy behavior. My belief is that we should classify unhealthy behavior as what it is. If a man rapes, he's a rapist, not toxic masculinity. If he hits a woman, he's an abuser, not toxic masculinity. I don't understand why we're complicating these type of terms and words when it doesn't have to be.
Patrice, I'll let you respond to what Eli had to say. Go ahead, Queen.
All right. Well, there is actually research that shows that certain behaviors that are instilled in us as young children and as we grow up, those behaviors evolve into other things that sometimes become toxic. To say that, I'm not going to say the majority, but there are men that do display toxic masculinity. One of the things that I'd like to point out is that 80% of black women that are assaulted or are murdered, it's a partner crime. It's the men that are in their lives. When you have statistics that say 80% of women, black women, by the time they reach 18, have experienced a sexually coercive act, there's a problem. Because these sexually coercive acts are not done with other women.
I'll let you jump back in. No problem.
And so I'm not saying many or all or most. I'm saying that there is a subset of our population that exhibit behaviors associated with toxic masculinity. And we have to call a spade a spade. We have to begin to get to the root cause of these issues. And if it's raising kids to not show emotion, to not understand respect, to not understand that we should be about protecting our community and the women and the children that are in our community. But so often those behaviors are not instilled in our young people, and these young people evolve and they display these toxic behaviors. So we have to call a spade a spade.
Let me say this real quick, Eli, and I'll let you respond. We also have a caller too, and I just want to throw in a little nuance before you respond. Okay, so one thing I heard you say, Latrice, and I think is critical to this conversation. You know, in a sense, you mentioned the term subset, and I would offer, if I'm hearing you correctly, Eli, again, you're not in denial of the subset. I think what you're really saying is, you know, you're concerned about a term that may be misused, particularly towards our community, which I don't think you're in complete disagreement with that, Latrice, or whatever. But I hear you both saying call a spade a spade. Yeah, I think y'all both are saying call a spade a spade. I think you have slightly different perspectives on what that is, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I'll even say, Latrice, thank you for, in a sense, you were careful to say not the majority, because one thing that I will throw out there is in this use of this term, and we'll see this throughout this show, I'll play some other cuts, where you see there's this concept of, quote, unquote, the majority of men, you know, being in this area or whatever. So, again, I like the specifics that both of you are kind of attacking this with. Eli, I'm going to let you respond, then I'm going to go to the caller after you. Go ahead, King.
I don't mind calling a spade, but the fact is the spade is not a spade. Our dear sister just said there's a study that 80% of women are engaged in some sort of sexual assault before the age of 18. I researched that particular study and found it to be a complete lie. This study was performed by an organization, one that was very radical feminist leaning. They surveyed a couple of hundred young ladies, and they controlled the study. As an educated woman, you know that this goes against standard when you're conducting a credible study. This study that 80% of black women have been sexually assaulted is not credible. It's a complete lie, and we have to stop repeating that because it perpetuates a stereotype that black men are out here being the boogeyman and raping their women and sexually assaulting their women. This is a lie. So why repeat things like this? Call a spade, but that's not a spade. That's just a lie.
And Eli, you'll notice that I didn't quote the 80%. I said 60%, which is a different study that was done by an academic organization. I know the study that you're referring to, and that study was done in Baltimore, I believe. I didn't quote that study. That study that you mentioned that quoted 80%, I agree with you. That is not accurate. It's based on a small set of women that were interviewed and that were put into this study in Baltimore, Maryland. I quoted 60%, which was an academic study.
Okay, well, I thought you
right. And let me throw this out. Let me throw this out real quick and get to the caller. Yeah, no, not a problem. What you did hear, Eli, just so that to get some clarity, because I'm just again trying to listen to both of you. She did mention the concept of 80% of women before 18 have experienced coercive act, which is completely different than actually assault or whatever. Did I hear that correct, Latrice? That is, I think that might be. It was 60% of women before the age of 8. Right. It was sexually coercive, which is different. It was 60%, not 80%.
She said 80.
Okay, I thought. Okay, yeah. What happens is, Latrice, you actually said 80. We did. So I thought you had quoted two different things. Okay, cool. So it's 60%. All right, good clarity. Let's go to the callers. We got a couple callers that we want to get in. Area code 402, last 3199. Give us your name, where you're calling from, and your 3 cents on this morning's discussion. Toxic masculinity, real or BS?
Yeah, my name is Stu. I'm calling from Nebraska. And
hey, what's going on, Stu? How you doing, King? What you got for us?
Yeah, I don't know if this has been mentioned yet, but a brother by the name of Dr. Tommy Curry, he in his book, The Man Not, he broke down the origins of the term toxic masculinity. And from those origins, it was said by race scientists back in the early 1800s that the black man was by nature an effeminate individual. And if he were to be raised by a single mother, he would carry forth behaviors that would, in a sense, contradict his natural masculinity by being raised by too much femininity in the society. Well, that term was picked back up in the 80s, whereas as a means of giving explanation to a lot of the young black males who were starting to be raised in single black female-ran homes due to the due to the use of how the welfare system was used. And in a sense that the word toxic masculinity means that a male or a man, if you will, having masculine traits and characteristics, having been raised in a single parent environment, normally female, takes on the attributes of feminine traits, which in turn cause a contradiction in this behavior. Now, that's the original root meaning of the term toxic masculinity. Now, I'm thinking in today's society, I conjecture that in today's society, it is being picked up, especially amongst a lot of black women, actually to effeminize black men who are actually masculine. Now, I can understand, what you're talking about as far as the ill traits connected to hyper masculinity and how that's used to abuse some women. But when a lot of women, especially black women nowadays, who use that term toxic, that is really being applied to men who are actually still masculine to more effeminize them and thus weaken, the black collective as a whole in a sense as far as forming strong structural family units. That's my 3 cents.
Hey, no, beautiful 3 cents, Stu. Since I got other callers, I'm going to let you go. You can always get back in, just come off the one and come back in if you decide to. But we would definitely discuss. Oh, go ahead, Gang. Yeah, please, go ahead.
But if you can, but if y'all can, check out Dr. Tommy J. Curry. He's on YouTube and a lot of videos, and his book, The Man Not, to get the true definition of the word toxic masculinity. Thank you.
No, thank you for that beautiful 3 cents. I'll say this very quickly. Latrice, I'll let you respond to what our caller had to say. And you and I have had personal discussions about this, Latrice, or whatever. And again, thank you for co-hosting this morning. And so one thing I heard in what Stu had to bring to the table, and I think you've heard me say this before, that I'm personally always concerned if there is an additional quote-unquote agenda. Sometimes you use that word and people think, oh, you're just copping out or whatever. But, I've always had that concern, whereas personally, you know me very personally, and I am concerned about, for example, even the example with Rick Ross. Like, I understand, even in a sense, the lady's commentary in reference to, again, and we all agreed it's problematic that, as Eli said, you can't be around a lady over a period of time and not want to have sex with her, whatever. So we all agree that that's problematic. And we also agree that there's a subculture. And, again, we may be kind of getting into the nuance of what we call it or what's the specific word and being careful with it and things of that nature. But, again, I just kind of wanted to bring that out. And, if you will, Latrice, just what did you hear in what Brother Stu brought to the table and in reference to the original meaning and how it applies today?
So I for the most part, I disagree because I'm looking at it from a psychological perspective. Dr. Curry comes from a philosophical perspective. So those are 2 different schools, 2 different perspectives. So for that aspect, we are varying in our definitions. Secondly, I do agree that there is a problem with single-parent households. However, I will not get to the point of blaming single parents, single mothers for the outcomes associated with it. And in a sense, I guess part of me does agree with him that sometimes women not having a man in the household will focus on hyper masculinity as it relates to, boy, don't act like a girl, or you can't let anybody talk to you crazy or dry those tears up because real men don't cry, things of this nature. Those are the kinds of the behaviors that we instill in our young people, where they grow up and they repress their emotions. They repress their feelings. They feel like, I'm not a real man if I don't have all these notches in my belt. I'm not a real man if I let somebody step to me and I don't step back. I'm not a real man if I allow my woman to talk to me and I don't talk to me crazy and I don't hit her. These are the behaviors that I'm talking about. Now, when it comes to stereotypes, you call them agendas, I call them stereotypes. There are stereotypes that impact black men and black women. Toxic masculinity, I'm not stupid. It does more adversely affect black men from a societal perspective than it does white men. Because when we think about black men, we think about hyperaggression. When we think about white men, we think socially elite. When we think about Latino men, we think, oh, they're good in bed. And when we think Asian men, for the most part, they've been demasculated when we come to media stereotypes. So those stereotypes exist. I'm not crazy enough to think that they don't. But my question is, do we play into these stereotypes by how we raise our boys to be men?
No, those are great questions. We're actually up against the break. We got other callers. Eli, we'll come to you out of the break. You're listening to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, where all I ask is that you think.
Find it, can capture all your sweetness and your kindness. Love can define it. We're crippled and love would only blind us. Well, love can define it. It has to be the Lord that's behind this. Oh, love can define it. Once in a lifetime you will find it.
You ever mimicked that kind of behavior, it wasn't normal, okay? If you are in a fraternity and you ever had women come over and you got them high and got them drunk, you know, that whole ain't no fun if the homies can't have none mentality. You and the rest of your frat ran a train on the girl. My brothers, that wasn't normal. It was rape culture, okay? Movies like Revenge of the Nerds and Kids. Remember those where guys would have sex with passed out women or dress up as other people in order to trick the women to have sex with them? That was rape culture. Remember Porky's? Remember sneaking up late to watch Porky's where they was drilling holes in the wall and peeping at the girls? I got homeboys in college who would be hitting chicks from the back, and then another homeboy would come in and start hitting the chick from the back without asking her consent. When we would get drunk and high with women and they would get inebriated and then we would sleep with them. I'm sorry, my brothers. All of that was rape culture. Hell, I look at some of the things I used to say to women in interviews here on the Breakfast Club, and I'm like, bruh, you was wilding. So when I see all of these sexual allegations coming out over the past couple of years, from Bill Cosby to Harvey Weinstein to Louis C.K., I don't know if it's because I'm older, but I'm looking at them like, why has this type of pervasion been normalized? And I think it's because a lot of brothers don't think they're doing anything wrong because it's been a common theme in our lives for way too long. Now, I don't know if it's because I'm actually listening to women more and not having these discussions about rape culture with guys, because that's what we do as men. We start having conversations about rape culture with each other. That's why we don't learn anything. And it's so normalized to us that we make excuses about why we do what we do, have done what we've done, that's where the whole victim blaming thing comes into play. And, you know, there's just no excuse. It's not about what the woman wore or what time she was at your house. It's all about accountability. We are in the age of accountability. And if we are being personally accountable and being morally honest, we just have to admit that we were raised on rape culture. And it was wrong. Okay, we are absolutely in the age of accountability. And if you're not holding yourself personally,
welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, special guest co-host Patrice Ross. Our special guest Eli Mark is on with us this morning for this morning's discussion: toxic masculinity, real or BS. We hear another cut from one Charlemagne the God. I think Charlemagne the God. I'm sorry. This topic, toxic masculinity, I think it would be hard-pressed, again, to dig in properly and thoroughly, not to bring up, in a sense, the term rape culture. Unfortunately, kind of gets coincides with this topic in a sense. A lot of times people say that toxic masculinity leads to, this concept, as we hear Charlemagne the God speak about aspects of that culture, that I will say, and Eli, I'll let you respond, that I will say, again, these are things that we've seen or heard about if you've attended college or whatever, but at the same time, I'm still big on this concept of subset, which, again, Eli, I don't think you run from that. I think, in a sense, it is a subset, but I don't say that word as if it's not, in a sense, problematic, as if it's not an issue, as if it doesn't create that 60% that Latrice just referenced before this break. So, Eli, if you will, again, jump in, give your perspective, again, on the cut. We're going to hear cuts throughout the show that bring it from both sides. Again, we're just starting here. If you will, Eli, I'll let you respond. We also have a caller on the line as well. Go ahead, Eli.
Well, sir, it's such a trendy topic right now, the idea of rape culture and toxic masculinity. And again, I don't disagree with the points these people are making. I disagree with the exaggeration of it. I disagree with the notion of connecting it to the general population of men, especially black men. Data does not back these people up. Most black men are not violent, predatory, or emotionally toxic, the overwhelming majority. In fact, I would argue 98%. If you look at the arrest records, the prison records, and even if you account for unreported records of abuse and predatory behavior, it's a fraction of society. So when Charlamagne's little speech is done, it kind of creates this narrative that the average man, especially black men, is predatory, emotionally toxic, or violent. Toxicity is not a male trait. It's a human trait. And people who happen to be toxic tend to choose their victims based on their access and power position, which is why data proves that predatory women tend to target children, the elderly, and nonviolent males. In most child abuse cases, a woman is the perpetrator, not a man. In most elderly abuse cases, a woman is the perpetrator, not a man. Yet we hear nothing about toxic femininity because it's a fake term.
Wow, let me say this. I'm going to let Latrice respond, then we're going to go to the caller. I will tell you, and again, I haven't seen, I respect what you're bringing to the table. I'm shocked, again, based on even some numbers that I've researched, that you're leaning towards the most, even in both the scenarios you just pointed out, whether it was a youth or elderly. I'm actually shocked to hear that you're suggesting that is most. I think in the past I've seen numbers that would say it's still heavily, again, the numbers of that small percentage of people who actually could, are involved in these type of crimes. I've always thought it was male heavy in that sense. But again, when we're talking about the actual numbers, like you said, it is a fraction of society. So I do want to be fair in that sense. And again, I'm not even saying you're wrong. I'm just shocked to hear you say that based on, and I don't have any studies right now to back me up, but Latrice may have some. So either way, and again, I'm just kind of speaking to it and saying I'm shocked to hear that part of it. Go ahead, Latrice, and then we'll go to the call.
So I'm going to say that, when we have a population of 59% of black men that are in post-secondary, that are receiving post-secondary education. I'm not saying that, and I've been very intentional about not saying most, many, and all, because it doesn't apply to the most, many, and all of men. Definitely doesn't apply to most, many, and all of black men. But we do have to acknowledge, even if it's 30%, even if it's 20%, we have to acknowledge that that subset of our population does exist. And I ended with the question, do we instill these behaviors in our young people by having these requirements of them to be stoic, to not show emotion, to stand your ground, to have them around situations where, man, that woman, your girlfriend talked to you like she was crazy, man. If that was me, I would have done this and that and the other. As far as the stats on child abuse and things of that nature, I didn't look those up. I will when I get the chance, because I don't think that they are as low. From the last time I did review them, they were not that low with regard, or that high with regard to women being the perpetuators of those acts. However, let's bring it back to toxic masculinity. There is a subset of our population that exhibits hyper-masculine behavior. And I'd like to just, in calling a spade, let's talk about where it originated from. Let's talk about how our ancestors were brought here against their will, and how the men were hyper-masculine, were shown to be hyper-masculine. They were these stoic bricks who could work without ceasing, that could withstand the whippings that they got. These concepts or these stereotypes were woven into our society from times of slavery. And oftentimes we bring those behaviors unwittingly, unconsciously into our community. Corporal punishment, when you really dig into the beginnings of corporal punishment and where they came from, it has its beginnings in slavery and the whippings that the slave masters inflicted upon our ancestors. So we have to really begin to remove the emotion and acknowledge what we're bringing into our community, what behaviors we're perpetuating in our society, in our community, that are negative. Now, I do believe that it adversely affects black men more so than other races, but it doesn't alleviate the fact that it does exist.
Hey, great thoughts from both of you. Let me go ahead and go to, we got a few callers who want to get in. Stu's trying to get back in as well, so let's see if we can get some of these callers in. Area code 480, last 314. Give us your name, where you're calling from, and your 3 cents on this morning's discussion.
Hello, my name is William Agnew. I am calling from Dallas, Texas.
Hey, what's going on, William? How you doing, King? What you got for us?
I'm good, man. I think, just talking about this topic, it's very interesting, and it's totally complex in my mind. It's a complex situation. And I know a lot of people use the term toxic masculinity. I hear a lot of buzzy words, right? And people fit it into their category of the point they're trying to make a lot of times. But I think getting back to the essence, because I always try to take it back to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem, especially for young black boys and black men like myself, is when is it and when is it not appropriate to use aggression? And I think aggression is the point, because as a black man in America, right, aggression is necessary, but what we're lacking is the understanding of when to use aggression, when it's appropriate and when it's inappropriate, right? I'll give you an example. I've seen 2 videos this week online where women were being attacked, and there was a lot of passivity. Men, black men, white men, standing around watching women be attacked. There was one woman on a train, a 78-year-old woman was getting kicked in the face 4 or 5 times, and nobody did anything. Right? So when does masculine toxicity play, and how does it play? And is it making us more passive? Because there are times when that aggression is very necessary. And what I see is we're getting to this point in society where we don't even know when, and we're not being triggered to protect our women. There was another example of a black woman being hit in the face multiple times by a white supremacist, and nobody did anything. And there were men, black men and white men, standing around watching this. So my point, instead of putting this into the topics that we're trying to the support, right, the buzzy words, because you can put it in everybody can put it in their little box, right, and justify the point they're trying to make. But at the end of the day, what we have to understand, and what's complex about it as a black man, is understanding that I need aggression to be successful in this world. I need to know when to be aggressive. I need to know when to be aggressive in business. I need to know when to be aggressive in my relationship. But I have to also know when that is appropriate and what level of aggression I need to exude and exemplify. And that's where we're not understanding where this differentiation between being aggressive and using aggression and not using it is it's changing our culture. It's changing our culture, and we're being so passive that we're not protecting our own women. And that is a fundamental problem that we have to get a hold on and a fix on. So we can't put it in these little specific topics. We have to understand the overall high-level understanding of aggression, and when is aggression appropriate, what does aggression look like, when is it inappropriate, and what level of aggression do we need to exemplify in certain situations. And we're failing to teach our young black men specifically that. That's the problem.
Hey, amazing 3 cents, King. At the top of the hour, I'm going to play a cut that maybe addresses exactly what you're talking about. I absolutely appreciate you, Eli. We got about a minute and a half before break, so I'm going to let you jump in on William's thoughts initially. Again, I may have to go to break in the middle of your thought, but we'll keep it going. William, if you want to get back in, please come off the one and come back on, but thank you for your 3 cents this morning.
I thought the brother made some excellent points. The only thing that I would disagree with, again, is this narrative that black men are not protecting black women. Men have historically protected their women, their daughters, male cousins historically protect the women in their family. That's the truth. That's the real narrative. If you were to survey the average black woman, I'm willing to bet that they would say they feel mostly protected by the men in their families. So that's the true narrative that I think should be represented, and not this fake narrative that men are just sitting around letting women in their tribe get beat on by other men. That's simply not true. There's no data to support that.
So let me say this before we go to break real quick, just to kind of share with you, and we can dig into it when we come back, and we'll get to the other callers. So I'll tell you, in my own lifetime, Eli, I agree with you. Again, like you said, when you get into the majority of what majority of men are doing, I will tell you in my own lifetime, I think what I've experienced in my generation is that what William is talking about, unfortunately, in my opinion, is growing amongst our generation. I would say mine at 45 and even younger. In my opinion, there are things that are happening to where this is growing, and in order to stop it, it needs to at least be addressed in some of the ways that I think William is saying. Again, it's just just my little 3 cents on it before we go to break. You listen to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, where all I ask is that you think.
My name is Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. I am the owner and facilitator of the Mental Dialogue Community Support Group, focused on practical solutions and the collective thinking of the Black community. We do that one of 2 ways. Every third Friday, 7 p.m. at Urban Grind, or Saturday mornings, the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Contact us at mentaldialogue.com or on Facebook at Mental Dialogue. All I ask is that you think.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy? What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men, we're acting
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
That's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
Welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, along with guest co-host Patrice Ross. Special guest with us this morning, Eli Marcus, for this morning's discussion, Toxic Masculinity, Real or BS. As some of you out there may have seen the Gillette commercial. This commercial definitely got from what I understood, I didn't see it. I don't watch TV. I end up watching it in preparation for the show. But I definitely had heard that it got a lot of attention in the media. And Patrice, I'm going to start with you. So, for the most part, based on what both of you have said, I think to a certain extent, both of you have shot down what we're hearing in that commercial again, because that commercial really says, some men doing right is not enough. So it's basically suggesting, in a sense, that most men are falling under, in a sense, this term of toxic masculinity and exhibiting these acts, which we've already all agreed that is not the case with the majority of men, whether black or white. Here's my concern, Latrice, if I can say this to you, and again, I definitely want to recognize, as we've kept mentioning, and I've kept saying it on the show, the idea of the subset. As I mentioned before the break, there is a concern of mine that a number of young men growing up not understanding what William talked about before the break. Here's my question to you. So the fact that we see national media putting out a commercial that's suggesting that the majority of men possibly fall under this description of toxic masculinity, again, and I mentioned it before, but that's my concern. Like, that's attached to something. And you've acknowledged the problem with making us, again, you don't do that, making black men the face of toxic masculinity. But what I will suggest to you whereas I want to recognize everything that you're saying we should recognize, being very aware I guess you say you call it stereotype or whatever, and you acknowledge that. But both of those things might need to be done. We need to recognize what you're saying, and in my eyes, we have to pay very close attention to big picture, and you've acknowledged how it could harm us, but that's where the divide is. People that are paying attention to that kind of fall on one side, and what you're saying, quite often people pit those sides against each other, but I think we have to recognize both things are kind of happening, if that makes sense. Go ahead, Quinn.
I agree that, and I'm in complete and total agreement with you. We do have to acknowledge that both of those things are happening. Now, I think that Eli downplays it a bit too much, because when you look at of black women that are murdered each year, 58% of those women are murdered by a husband, boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, etc. So that statistic alone says that there is a problem that we need to own, that we need to acknowledge, address, own, resolve. Now, we have to do this in the greater scope of stereotypes black people in ways that are not true. And they apply these stereotypes with the paintbrush. They say that black women are loud and obnoxious, that we're Jezebels and sex addicts, that we have babies and get on welfare. They say that black men are too aggressive, too hypersexualized. So, yes, I am completely aware of what society says about black people that are incorrect. But we do ourselves and our community a disservice by not acknowledging that there are issues that exist that we need to address. The problem is that people like microwave sound bites. No one's willing to dig in and do the work. When you bring something to me that I don't understand, I want to know what's the definition. Let me research this a little bit further. Now, let me disprove what I believe to be true. But we have people who see a soundbite on CNN and they see a picture and they automatically associate that picture with the soundbite with statistic, and there you have it. We're going away with the stereotype. Black men are going to hurt you. Now, as a black woman, I sometimes feel unsafe in black environments. I was at a local mall here in Atlanta. I was alone. A black man tried to get my attention. I was alone. It was 8 o'clock. It was dark. It was late. I ignored him, didn't make any faces, didn't give him any gestures. I just looked straight ahead and kept walking. That group of men proceeded to follow me throughout that mall and call me all kinds of bitches and whores and everything else that they could think of in an attempt to intimidate me. Did anyone stop them? No. I found security and asked them to walk me to my car. So these kinds of instances, while I know that it's not true, I was robbed at knife point by a black man. 2 years when I took the intrinsic, the test that talks about unconscious bias, I was moderately biased towards black men. And when I debriefed that assessment, it's because 2 years prior, I had been robbed at knife point by a black man. So when we say that women don't feel safe, it's because their brain is stepping in, because they may have had experiences where they had a negative experience with a black man, and now they're applying that experience to all. And we have to be intentional about not doing that. I'm with Eli. It doesn't apply to the majority of black men. It doesn't apply to most black men. It definitely doesn't apply to all black men, because the black men in my circle are kings, and they make me feel safe. But we do have to acknowledge that we do have a problem when we look at the murder rate of black women and who kills them.
So, murders will always. Yeah, go ahead. Let me say this real quick, Eli. You can respond. Well, actually, go ahead and respond, because I want to bring. I got a caller that wants to get in. I want to bring something, a text from Facebook to the table too. But go ahead, Eli.
First of all, I want to say that I fundamentally agree with our sister. I think we disagree on some other things, but I fundamentally agree with her. People will always be murdered. You are not harassed by a black man. You are not robbed at gunpoint by a black man. You are robbed by a criminal. You are harassed by a criminal. That isn't the point. The point to focus on is that a very small percentage of society engages in violent behavior that results in murder. The point is the vast majority of murderers are charged, convicted, and held accountable by the law, which is often carried out by men. The point is the vast majority of black men are healthy, functional, and nonviolent. Now, when you structure your sentences, I was robbed by a black man, you're not even saying the word criminal. You're not even saying the word a robber. you're saying black man. That does something psychologically to people who are constantly hearing sentences like that. Black men are murderers. Black men are robbers. And that is a disrespect to the English language. And I think it's a sort of subtle conditioning. Intelligent cultures don't allow foreign cultures to invent and impose terms like toxic masculinity on their people. Intelligent cultures handle their issues in-house and invent their own terms and solutions to their problems. This is about the politics of power, people. Black men need as much masculinity as they can get to perform and win in the marketplace, which black women and children benefit from.
Hey, strong thoughts. Let's go to the caller. Area code 313, last 3966. Give us your name, where you're calling from, and your 3 cents on this morning's discussion.
This is Eric. Hello, Montoya, Latrice, and Eli.
How you doing, King? What you got for us?
All right. Well, I'm not going to repeat what Latrice said because I second that. And both of you are making very good points, Eli, but I would have to agree with Latrice that you are downplaying it just a bit. And I think we need to get out of semantics a little bit. To me, I don't care what we call it, toxic masculinity or whatever else we want to call it. And I'm going to call it toxic masculinity because that's just for the sake of this conversation, that's what it is. And toxic masculinity, to me, is practiced in all cultures, not just African American, although we're talking about African Americans today. Emotional detachment, hyper-competitiveness, aggression, intimidation, violence, sexual objectification, and sexually predatory. Those are characteristics of toxic masculinity. And for us to just pretend as though that this doesn't exist in all cultures with a lot of men, especially in today's society, it's a disservice to us, particularly the points that Latrice is trying to make. And maybe we're looking at it from a psychological standpoint versus a philosophical standpoint like that one of the previous guys was speaking of. But, here's my concern. If it wasn't an issue, then we wouldn't have such large numbers of our black and brown people, particularly black people, in prisons or joining gangs. Or if we're talking about protecting women, as you're saying, that we have a large number of men. I would like to believe that is true, and I hope that is true. But that's not what I see all of the time, especially when we see YouTube and all these other things. But in large numbers, we have an epidemic of men not even fathering their children or even staying with the women that they're impregnating out of wedlock, might I say. So, and even fathering their children voluntarily. Now, I'm not trying to change the narrative of the conversation. I'm just saying that, like what Latrice is saying, as a black male, we got to acknowledge that this is true, and let's not focus on how we got there. Let's just focus on, well, we do have to pay attention to how we got there, but can we find a resolution? And the only way that you can find a resolution is to look within yourself, look outside of yourself at the same time, pay attention to those around you whom are exhibiting these behaviors and try to fix it. And I see a lot of these behaviors in the black community with our black males. Let's not pretend as though it doesn't exist. And I'm not saying you're not saying that it doesn't exist, right? I'm sorry. But let's just not downplay it.
Hey, we got a couple minutes before we go to the top of the hour break, so I'm going to give you a quick challenge. I'm pretty sure Eli and Latrice like to address you. We won't get to do that. I just want to play out something because I just heard Eli say it, and I'm kind of working in my mind as I hear you, Eric, and again, respect your 3 cents this morning. Is it possible, and again, this is a nuance of what I heard you say, is it possible when you listen to Eli get into the specifics of how we're using language? Like, he brought that point to the table, and so, like, for a period you said, hey, you said based on what I see, on YouTube and things of that nature, is it possible that the way these terms are being used is why to a certain extent you're seeing it as more than it really is? And so what I kind of hear Eli saying is the nuance of how these terms, as he says, being given to us by someone outside of our community, and when you hear a commercial that literally puts the majority of men under this under this veil, is it possible that we have to be, as he's saying, very careful about the term misuse to even give the idea, as he said, a criminal put a knife to her neck. like is a perspective that I've never heard it said that way. So I'm saying, is it possible that there is a social what's the word you used, Eli?
Conditioning.
You said it.
Conditioning.
Yeah, social conditioning was the word I'm looking for. Is that possible? I just want to get your quick thought on that before we go to the top of the hour.
It's possible. Let me answer.
I'm going to let Eric go, and I got to go to the top of the break.
And I will need to respond to this as well as
the top of the break is going to change a lot. We're not going to get to do that, y'all.
Okay.
Please work with me. I promise you. Yeah, Eric, I'll give you a quick response, and I got to go to break. You got a minute.
Is it possible? Yes. However, at the same time, he has to acknowledge all of the points that I've just made, and even the points that Latrice just made. It is there, and I don't give a damn what we call it, if it's toxic masculinity or what. I don't think it's necessarily social conditioning, because white women are complaining about the same damn thing about the white men. Indian women are saying the same thing about their Indian men, and so on and so forth. So it's everywhere. So it's not. We're talking about just the topic of how it manifests itself in the black community, and how do we fix it? How do we address it? How do we evaluate it? What do we do about it? And black men have to call a spade a spade.
And I've heard them call a spade. Fair enough. Again, it may matter. I think it may matter what we call it.
And myself trying to understand where he's coming from, but is he understanding the points that Latrice is calling out?
I think I've heard him admit it's crazy. I think I've heard him agree to it many a time. Specific in the term, and I'm not pushing one way or the other. I just think, to be fair, he said he's agreed mostly with what she had to say. I don't know if you heard that part, but he's consistently said that.
I did, and I even agree with some of the points that he has made.
I got to go to break, brother. I got to let you go. Sorry.
Understood.
Listening to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. All I ask is that you think, if y'all will listen to this cut, because it takes us in a different direction. Again, we're going to be fair to both sides. We listen to the Talk Show. We'll be right back.
Rape, murder, war. They all have one thing in common. Men. Aggression, violence, ambition unchecked by conscience, all the stuff of toxic masculinity, right? And the solution is obvious. Make men less toxic. Make men less masculine. Make men more like women. But I'm here to tell you that way of thinking is not only wrong, it's dangerous. Here's why. When you try to make men more like women, you don't get less toxic masculinity. You get more. Why? Because bad men don't become good when they stop being men. They become good when they stop being bad. Aggression, violence, and unbridled ambition can't be eliminated from the male psyche. They can only be harnessed. And when they are harnessed, they are tools for good, not for harm. The same masculine traits that bring destruction also defeat tyranny. The traits that foster greed also build economies. The traits that drive men to take foolish risks also drive men to take heroic risks. The answer to toxic masculinity isn't less masculinity. It's better masculinity. And we know what that looks like. It's a young man opening the door for a girl on their first date. It's a father working long hours to provide for his family. It's a soldier risking his life to defend his country. The growing problem in today's society isn't that men are too masculine. It's that they're not masculine enough. When men embrace their masculinity in a way that is healthy and productive, they are leaders, warriors, and heroes. When they deny their masculinity, they run away from responsibilities, leaving destruction and despair in their wake. The consequences can be seen everywhere. 1 in 4 fathers now lives apart from his children. And children who grow up without a dad are generally more depressed than their peers who have a mother and a father. They are at far greater risk for incarceration, teen pregnancy, and poverty. 71% of high school dropouts are fatherless. Of all the rocks upon which we build our lives, family is the most important. And we are called to recognize and honor how critical every father is to that foundation. That was said by then Senator Barack Obama in 2008. If we are honest with ourselves, he went on, we'll admit that too many fathers are missing from too many lives and too many homes. As much as we try to deny the need for real masculine strength in society, there's no denying its necessity. Healthy families and strong communities depend on the leadership and bravery of good men. Yet, the current trend is to feminize young men in the hopes of achieving some utopian notion of equality and peace. And it starts at the earliest ages. In the school classroom, boys are invariably the problem. On the playground, aggressive games like dodgeball have long been banished. We tell young men that their intrinsic desire to compete is wrong. Everybody gets a trophy. Don't run up the score. This anti-male tilt continues on through higher education and into the workplace. It has created millions of tentative men, unhappy women, and confused boys and girls. Here's a secret that every woman knows. Women want real men. Men they can count on and, yes, look up to. No amount of feminist theory will change that.
Welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, along with special guest Eli Marcus, co-host Latrice Ross. This morning's discussion, toxic masculinity, real or BS. As we just heard a pretty long cut that gives obviously a different perspective on this idea of toxic masculinity. Latrice, I'll start with you, and Eli, I'll let you come after that. We also have a caller. We definitely, again, just work with me on the direction of where we're headed. So your response to the cut, Latrice, if you will.
I don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly with the cut.
Just got you live. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I said I don't agree wholeheartedly with the cut. Number one, it annoys me when people try to push everything, blame everything on feminism. When I started, I opened with a very intentional comment about the true, very specific definition of toxic masculinity, and that problems occur when we apply a broad paintbrush to toxic masculinity instead of keeping it defined by those narrow scopes. When Eli mentioned manspreading, that's not toxic masculinity to me. That's male privilege to me, because many times men say they need more space, and to be honest, they're larger, they're more muscular. Sometimes they do. But that manspreading applies to when they sit on, it started in public transportation, they spread their legs open and taking up more space than they're allotted. That's not toxic masculinity. That's privilege, in my opinion. So we need to be clear that we define it properly and that we address the issues that make people hyper-masculine, make men hyper-masculine. They are not allowed to cry. Additionally, this evolves to our community's issue with mental health. Oftentimes, these types of the negativity associated with toxic masculinity plays out the way in which it does because we have an aversion to mental health care in our community. And when we don't deal with that, when we don't deal with all the things that as Black people we encounter in society day in, day out, the oppressive behaviors, the systemic racism, that has to come out some way, somewhere. And oftentimes it comes out in the intimate partner violence that many people experience. So in calling a spade, we have to begin to address that we need an outlet for the oppression that we encounter each and every day. We need an outlet for the behaviors that we have to exhibit in mainstream society in order to not be marginalized.
So here's my question before because I want Eli, I want you to, if you will, you had an amazing Facebook post. I want you to kind of, be fair to bring that to the table. But I want to say this to Latrice before you do so. So, and again, and this is working through the nuance of it all. Mm-hmm. So, the idea of calling a spade, I definitely remember early on Eli just kind of mentioning, I think he mentioned we already have names for it. I think he's going to say it in this post that he's about to share. We already have names for those things, and if we already have names for those things and there are problems that we need to address, I don't think anyone's saying we don't need to address them. How do we, in a sense, what if the term is set up per se? Because again, and as a man, I can't help but be concerned about that or whatever. I'm fully into acknowledging the idea. Let me even say this to you, Eli. Let me throw this out to you as well. Having done this show for a few years, we've done several shows where, unfortunately, King, I will say to you, I'm definitely here. And matter of fact, I'm gonna share this post before you share yours. I'm definitely in a situation where I hear our women constantly in the idea of not feeling protected. And it may be a case like where they may have had an experience like Latrice, and, you know, based on the work that she was able to do, she didn't apply it to all men. So I think sometimes you do have those scenarios where, based on their specific situation and the way society goes, in a sense, they may, quote unquote, apply their very personal issue to all black men, but it's quite understandable, especially if you don't get the psychological help. Again, I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm pretty sure that's a part of it. But even sisters who maybe have not had the worst of experiences are, in a sense, saying, and I've heard enough saying, they don't feel protected. Now, I'm not again saying I agree with everything they're saying, but I do want to make you aware that I definitely, you know, here in Atlanta, for example, hear that a great deal. Let me share this post with you, and then you can share your post as well. And again, I think this is just something that's something that needs to be brought to the table. And again, we're just doing nuance here. So this post is from a friend of mine, and I'll even give a little context because I think it kind of deals with this from both sides of it. This is a friend of mine who is, you know, from what I could tell, now happily married, feels highly protected by her husband, at least again in my dealings with them and seeing their relationship. But she wrote this post recently, and again, I'm giving this context before you hear it. So it's almost, so she feels protected. She's in a great marriage at this point or whatever. But this post of what you're about to hear is, in my assessment of this post, her addressing, in a sense, what she left, in a sense, this single world amongst her friends or whatever. This is what she feels like she left. And again, I know her very well enough in this post. You know, let me hear what y'all think about it, and then, Eli, you can share your post. So what she simply said was, we're dealing with a generation of men who have internalized neglect so deeply that they will swear they don't need anybody, when truly all y'all need is love. Now, if somebody has something in the background, if y'all can mute yourself, please, for while you're doing whatever you're doing. Sorry. Men who have been wounded will create these narcissistic facades of being a masculine man, a god, or a king, ain't earned a damn thing, and use that to mishandle every woman beneath them. Then we'll come back to society with the narrative that no one is there for you or you don't have any support for understanding when your brokenness broke every woman you've ever encountered. No, y'all have support, y'all are loved, y'all are cherished, y'all just have to stop crying out for help amongst the same women you've trampled over and complaining when nobody responds. We're not breaking our own hearts to heal yours anymore. Go, do your own work. We're tired, boss. I think that's a poignant post. And Eli, I want you to address it first before you share your post. Again, this sister is happily married, feels protected by her man, but it's, again, addressing maybe this hyper-masculine or this subset of men who are not done the work. Your thoughts on what she had to say. Eli, did I lose you? Or did you maybe mute yourself and come back?
Oh, you know what? I was muted. Sorry about that, brother.
Yeah, not a problem. Go ahead, King.
That's her lived experience, and I would never invalidate a person's stated lived experience. It's probably a valid point for a lot of men who do practice that behavior. I find that women who do feel protected by the men in their tribe, they have totally different speeches that they give as opposed to women who may not feel protected by the men in their tribe. So that's really what it is. The black community is not a community where we're all having the exact same experiences. Black women have different experiences. Some agree with what I'm saying, some disagree, and so do black men, black women and men. So people are tribalistic. And I'm only surrounded by women who have good things to say about me and generally good things to say about men, and they reward me with their praise and with their love for protecting and providing for them. So that's why I speak the way that I speak, because I'm not constantly hearing negative things about me or about the black male race. And we're very careful about the language that we use. That's not to say there isn't issues in the culture, but those issues simply do not exist in my tribe. And I refuse to take on the burden, the moral debt of other tribes who are unproductive, criminal-minded, and ratchet.
Oh, those are fair thoughts. And actually, fortunately, we've gotten to the break. So when we come out of the break, if you will, Eli, prepare to share that post, if you will. Are you prepared to share that, King? I just wanted to check before I ask you to do it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sounds perfect. So we're going to go to a quick break. We're going to have Eli read again this post in reference to how he sees this whole idea of toxic masculinity. Patrice, I definitely want your response. For any of the callers that are out there on the line, please press 1. We will get you in reference to the show. I see you out there, 678-400. We will get to you after this break. You're listening to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. All I ask is that you think.
My name is Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. I am the owner and facilitator of the Mental Dialogue Community Support Group, focused on practical solutions and the collective thinking of the Black community. We do that one of two ways: every third Friday, 7 p.m. at Urban Grind, or Saturday mornings, the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Contact us at mentaldialogue.com or on Facebook at Mental Dialogue. All I ask is that you think.
Hey, where did you get that hat and t-shirt? I like that.
Oh, I got this at moneymotivation.com. It's fresh, right?
Yes, and I love the message on it too. You are the hustle, huh?
That's what the shirt says. I am the hustle. They embody the entrepreneurial spirit, and what I like the most, it's more than a brand. It's a lifestyle for those who want to put in the work and expect to have the finer things in life. I also follow them on Instagram. Check this post out.
If you believe money is the root of all evil, you're using it wrong?
Or how about this one? Excuses make $0 an hour.
I like those. What's their IG?
At moneymotivation.co.
But do they have any ladies' gear?
Yes, you're going to love the clothing line they got for the ladies. Matter of fact, pull up their website, moneymotivation.com, and I'm going to get you a few things so we can both look like money.
Everywhere I go, and everywhere I be, I don't even talk, they still know it's me. Cause I look like money, smell like money, talk like money, even walk like money.
Welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, along with guest co-host Latrice Ross. This morning's discussion question: toxic masculinity, real or BS? Special guest Eli Marcus, writer, and many of things. And you'd like to hear a piece that he wrote recently on Facebook. And if you will, King, go ahead and share your thoughts. Latrice, I know I tried to share this with you, and I definitely want to hear your direct thoughts to what Eli has to say. This is slightly a quite long piece, so just be warned for anybody out there listening. But I want you to pay attention closely to what this king has to say. It was definitely a different perspective for me in reference to this topic. And like I said, Latrice, would love to hear your thoughts afterwards. Go ahead, King.
The term toxic masculinity is the intellectual dishonesty equivalency of the term black-on-black crime. In my specific tribe and culture, toxic masculinity does not exist. We call predatory, unhealthy, and or abusive individuals what they are without linking their behavior with their masculinity, femininity, or gender social construct, particularly when there is no credible data to support it. We reject the concept of toxic masculinity, as we believe there are so many complexities and intricacies as to why people engage in abusive, violent, or unhealthy behaviors that have little to do with gender social construct and more to do with the person's unique issues, be it one of mental illness, past unresolved traumatic life experiences, stress, being poorly raised, or simply having an abnormal abusive temperament. It's reasonable to approach criminality, violence, and unhealthy behaviors this way, when in most developed societies, the vast majority of men are nonviolent and non-predatory. We believe the vast majority of men and women are reasonably healthy people. Thus, there is no need to link bad behavior with it being an entire gender issue derived from a social construct, especially when terms already exist to define the action or behavior, like abuser, criminal, predator, sociopath, and so on. We do not subscribe to the term toxic masculinity as a valid one, just as we do not see the whole black-on-black crime as a valid argument. It's racist, slick, and intended to demonize an entire group of people based on their color by cherry-picking from the lowest rotten fruit to present as examples as to how the whole garden is rotten, when it is not. Sociopaths, rapists, violent abusers, and men with severe emotional issues don't turn into monsters due to their gender social construct, especially when 98% of all other men on earth turned out reasonably healthy and functional in life without harming others. Violent gangsters who happen to be black likely make up less than 0.5% of the black population. When a gangster murders a law-abiding black citizen, that's not black-on-black crime. It's gangster culture on a citizen crime. Law-abiding, nonviolent black citizens make up more than 98% of the black population. The term black-on-black crime isn't justified based on credible data. It's a word game, whereas it gives the appearance of meaning one thing, but is deceptively used to train the mind to hate and demonize the creator of the term's intended target. Example, black people, black men, etc. This is a form of intellectual dishonesty in lazy language that is very dangerous and could result in unintended consequences like disarming and discouraging healthy masculine men from their protective instincts from poorly behaved criminal-minded predators. In my tribe, the toxic masculinity term is viewed as something that is simply about attacking men in all forms of masculine-leaning expressions from men on some level with nitpicking, gender-warring rhetoric. This is not our way. In my tribe, consume poisonous thought concepts of any kind from outsiders because we've seen what it has done to black people globally. The end.
Latrice?
Okay. So I think we're arguing semantics here, word usage here. And because I'm a stickler for definitions, while the piece is great, and I actually agree with most of it, because of the definition by which I define and which the APA and others define toxic masculinity, I stick to it. When we have the suicide rate of men by the age of 45 being exceptionally high, when surveyors or researchers talk to men about their feelings about manning up or showing emotion or crying and how they feel when they're not allowed to do these things and how they repress those emotions, we have a problem. And honestly, I don't care what you call it. It can be toxic masculinity. It can be predatory behavior. It really doesn't matter. My concern is that we focus on solutions so that the black women who are being killed by their intimate partners, that stops, which is 3 times higher than white women or Latino women, 3 to 5 times higher, depending on the ethnic group, than others. We have to understand how our brain works. And, one of the things you mentioned is that I said it was not a criminal. No, because my brain didn't record my incident as a criminal. My brain looked at the person who held a knife to my throat and he classified them as a black man. And as a result of that, that's how I then began to understand the unconscious bias and how our brain works and how it impacts us as we go through life. The more you know, the more you're able to combat those unconscious thoughts. So we have to take into account the lived experiences. One of the things you said in your statement, Eli, is that you keep your circle and that you don't stray from those circles, and I paraphrase. Well, I talk to people who exhibit these behaviors because I need to understand why. I talk to people who malign women. I talk to people who don't understand why calling me a female other than a woman is offensive to me. I intentionally reach out and engage these people in conversation so I can understand the why behind what you do. And that's perhaps given me the perspective. I still recognize that the vast majority of my brothers, the vast majority of men, are not this way. And there are those where something went wrong, a twist or some chemical imbalance, something happened in the brain, some lived experience, something went wrong, and turned them into this criminal, this predator, this rapist. At the end of the day, the behaviors that they exhibited were considered to be hyper-masculine. They were very aggressive, hypersexualized, hence toxic masculinity. So we're arguing behaviors and what to call it. I'll call it whatever you want, as long as we can come up with a solution for it.
Hey, sounds good. Let's go to the callers. We got a couple callers on the line. If you're online, I haven't even got the number of people who've been calling in anyway, so it's good. If you're online, the number to get in is 646-787-1691. You will need to press 1 and let us know you want to speak. Let's go to a caller right now. Area code 678, last 3400. Give us your name, where you're calling from, and your 3 cents from this morning's discussion.
Man, this is ERGJ on another dialogue show. Hi! He took my number.
What's up, King? What's up, King? I didn't think you listened. You be too busy to listen to us normally. What you got for us this morning, King? Go ahead.
I'm just on my way to Birmingham, man. So I got 2 quick things, man. As I'm listening to the show, man, one, is toxic masculinity only in men? Because I'm seeing the same traits that could be distributed for the woman's side. So I'd like to hear that point. Is this just man, or is it just behavior? Period. Because I think men and women both
let's jump in and let my guest answer you, and then you can ask the second question.
Okay, all right. So I want to go ahead.
Yeah, yep. All right. I'll let you start, Latrice. Hello? ERG, are y'all there?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. There are toxic feminine behaviors that exist, and I don't stray away from it. I confront it head on. You are absolutely correct.
So just make sure, are we saying that there's toxic masculinity in women, not toxic feminine, toxic masculinity distributed or shown by women?
So are there hyper-aggressive women? Yes. Are there hypersexualized women? There may be, but it's probably displayed differently. But are some women hyper-violent? Absolutely they are. So not all of the behaviors can be attributed, but there are some that can be. To your point.
Let me let Eli respond real quick. Hey, George, let me let Eli respond real quick, and then you can come back. I'm just trying to get everybody in. Go ahead, Eli. Quick thought to what?
Back to my earlier point. This is why I reject the language altogether, because I think we can just call predators predators, abusers abusers, criminals criminals, without this notion of toxic masculinity or toxic femininity. I think it's intellectually dishonest, and it's not needed. Those concepts are unnecessary, not needed, when we can just call a person's behavior what it is. More importantly, as a marketer, as a person who uses language to get people to buy things, that's what I do for a living. I understand how conditioning works. I understand how word choices work. Black people, black men, are self-criminalizing themselves, and this culture, academia culture that pushes these terms, are criminalizing and demonizing black people. So I disagree with our dear sister that it doesn't matter what we call it. It does matter, and it's having severe, catastrophic effects on our people.
Evan, go ahead.
I definitely agree with vocabulary is very important. There's the reason why we have a full dictionary. Now, my second question is, based on these definitions, I suffer from toxic masculinity. What do I need to do? How do I solve this problem?
Tylenol.
So you're hyper-aggressive? You're violent? You focus on violent behavior?
I am super aggressive.
Okay.
No, let me ask you what she said now. She said, what about the violent behavior part? Because the one thing I will say, to be fair to Latrice, is she has given a specific definition. Now, again, I definitely understand where you're coming from, Eli. Again, I'm not necessarily siding here, but I do want to be fair that she has been very specific. And I don't know if you heard that part, Evan. Again, I want you to answer her. But it's just keep in mind when she's saying it, she's saying a very specific definition, not the broad definition that typically gets used. She did lead the show saying she doesn't agree with the broad definition. Go ahead, King.
And that's fine. But my point is, like, if we're saying, hey, we want to look at solutions, I'm asking, how do I solve it? And it's coming back to me. Am I this? Am I that? Well, so
no. You said you were. You said
okay.
You were.
So what do I need to go about trying to fix my issue? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I asked the same thing. I said, I don't really care what we call it, but how do we resolve it? So part of it is, I guess determine whether we're going to go by the specific definition or whether we're going to go by the broad definition. I completely disagree with the broad definition of toxic masculinity and call it a mental illness of mine. I'm a stickler for definitions, which is why I keep coming back to my narrowly defined definition of this type of perceived gendered behavior. So how do we resolve it? I don't know. Do we teach first of all, we need to incorporate mental health into our annual health care. That's one way to resolve a lot of the issues associated with the intimate partner violence that we see that happens with women and even some men. That would be a big deal if our community were more willing and accepting of seeking out and receiving mental health care. So that's the first step. Have you considered that to help you with your overly aggressive behavior?
Mental health.
Evan, great questions. Oh, go ahead real quick. We up against the break. Sorry, King. Go ahead. Don't let you laugh. Hold on.
I was just going to say language is important because when we hit it, we said with her response, I'll point this out, her response was, it happens for men and some women. It's like we just keep catering to
No,
that was your language.
I said the intimate partner violence. There are some men where women are the abusers, but it's more women that are abused than men. That's where I said some women are the abusers. But I've been very clear that it's not most, many, and all when it comes to men that display toxic behaviors. It is none of those things. There is a small percentage of our population that displays those behaviors.
Do we have anything
we got to go to
Eli?
break. Thank you, Evan.
When you get back,
go to break,
King.
Yeah, absolutely. I got another caller who wants to get in as well. You're listening to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. We'll be right back. Well, all I ask is that you think.
Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates. I am the owner and facilitator of the Mental Dialogue Community Support Group, focused on practical solutions and the collective thinking of the Black community. We do that one of two ways, every third Friday, 7 p.m. at Urban Grind, or Saturday mornings, the Mental Dialogue Talk Show, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Contact us at mentaldialogue.com or on Facebook at Mental Dialogue. All I ask is that you think. Welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. We're having a lively discussion on toxic masculinity, real or BS, with special guest Eli Marcus, as well as special guest co-host Patricia Ross. Before I go ahead, I do have to acknowledge my sponsors, moneymotivation.com, as well as Square Business Entertainment and L&G Technologies. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you have a product or service you want to get out to the smartest audience in all of radio, please give me a call at 404-604-9477, as well as listeners. This is, as I always call it, the return of intelligent radio. If you want to be, I need your support to keep this on the air. If what we're doing, you feel is important, because again, we're not here just to entertain you. I think this is important work, trying to dialogue and figure these things out and hopefully give people seeds and things that they can use for themselves. And again, this is important work. If you agree that it's important work, please visit us at mentaldialogue.com. I am laying it out. If you know it's up, it will not be gone one day. We definitely need your support. mentaldialogue.com. If you're outside of Atlanta, we have a support level. If you're in Atlanta, we ask that you become a member. I'm only $5 a month if you're in Atlanta, $2 a month for supporters outside of Atlanta. If you have a business, we actually have higher memberships in which you receive discounts on advertising, even some free advertising with the show. So again, please go to mentaldialogue.com and check us out. Coming out of the break, I think Evan asked an amazing question
in a sense, what's the solution? How do we solve it? I have some areas I want to go, but to get it all in, and we got some callers that want to get in. So what I'm going to do, and we'll definitely get to the solution conversation, because we've got to have that conversation for this last half of the show. But let me at least get to this caller who's been on hold for a little while. Area code 202, last 3583. Please give us your name and where you're calling from this morning.
Hey, Montoya, it's Hillary from Baltimore. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, Queen? What you got for us this morning? Jump in.
Well, I agree, I guess, with Eli. I like this post. I like the other clip that you played of the girl that was talking about masculinity. I think that term is totally BS. It's very racialized. It's only applied to black men. That's consistent with the ongoing theme of, black men being problematic that we've had since slavery. I don't think it's a problem for a man to be masculine or hypermasculine or whatever that is. I think that's perfectly fine, and especially for black men, because that whole theory is to keep black men weak. Because when they're weak, they're not going to be doing anything to strengthen their community or protect their community or anything like that. So I don't think they should be vilified for being masculine or strong individuals. And I don't think that I agree with Eli that we should not forgive us and then tell us that's our problem and we have to figure it out. I don't think it's a problem at all. There are criminals and people with pathological behaviors. But that is not, I don't think that we should accept that as like, this is how our whole group is, because other people don't do that. They rape people on the buses in India, and you don't have that same conversation or even thought about Indian men. We live in a whole system of white supremacy. You feel perfectly comfortable in all white areas of being around white people. So why would you feel uncomfortable being around your own people unless you've been conditioned to think that they're poisonous, which is what toxic means. They're poisonous. Your men are not poisonous.
Let me ask you this real quick, Hillary, and I'll let both our guests respond to you. And I just want to see what your thoughts are. I have my own thoughts in reference to this, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it. So, for example, earlier we played the Gillette commercial, and the Gillette commercial really just kind of laid it out there that all men are toxic. So it wasn't even particular to our community. So when you see a campaign such as that, how does it relate to in your perspective? Again, I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear yours.
I didn't hear the whole commercial, but them saying all men are toxic, they know what they mean. Like the conversation is only reserved for black men, because there's no conversation, certainly no national conversation, about white men being toxic or how to fix their toxic masculinity. I think it's a BS term. And and even the clip that you played of the white girl was, white people don't encourage their sons to be meek, but you're supposed to encourage black boys to be meek and black men to be meek.
So it's okay, fair enough. What I will say to you is, the national campaigns do exist. I still think and here's where I agree with you though. It's like how, for example, how we know the term thug is used in the national media, right? So we know specifically who they're talking about per se or whatever. So I still think that element is something that we always should be concerned about, how white supremacy goes about its business. But what I will say to you, that definitely the national, just to be fair, whatever, even like you said, even the clip, that clip is literally that lady talking about what's happening nationally. So she's not worried about, she's saying, hey, we need more masculinity, because she feels, in her opinion, that the emasculation of men in general is why she did that clip. So she is applying it to all. Again, it's just trying to be fair, give fair context to the fact that it is happening nationally. I work in the school system, and a lot of stuff that she pointed out in her video is happening in the schools, and it concerns me as a man, but particularly as a black man. Again, things that hurt America end up hurting us threefold, so that's why I'm more concerned about it. Again, I want to give my thoughts on it as well, but thank you so much, Hillary, for your 3 cents. I'm going to let our guests respond to you as well. We'll start with you, Latrice, again. Let the queen start first. Go ahead. Latrice, did you mute yourself again?
Not on mute.
Eli, go ahead and start. We'll try to see if I may have lost you. I got to check the board. Go ahead, Eli. I'll let you respond to Hillary first.
Well, obviously, I agree with the sister. And Latrice mentioned a point earlier regarding the data of domestic partner cases, abuse cases, being higher amongst Black women. First of all, when we put this into context, we still see that over 98% of Black men are nonviolent, will never go to jail for violence, will never be charged with violence. There's no record of them being consistently violent towards their intimate partners. So when we take the few cases that happen, because it is rare when you compare it to the general population, then we can say, 58% of these women were abused or murdered by a Black man. Well, murders are going to always exist, but we have to put it in context. More importantly, poor communities commit more crimes, regardless of race. So if you see a higher statistic amongst Black people as it relates to crime than white women, it's because Black communities tend to be poorer, so they commit more crime. And the bottom line here is, if you ask my perspective, people are mad because they broke. That's what it is it always boils down to economics. We spend too much time exploring these rabbit hole terms and concepts like toxic masculinity and not enough time spent on pursuing power and wealth. That will solve most of our issues in our community. The fact is, people are poor, powerless, frustrated, and they mad. And they want to take their anger out on somebody. And right now, this whole notion of toxic masculinity is trending. My solution is get some money, get some power, and watch how the narratives and attitudes of people change.
Patrice, got you back on. Go ahead, Queen.
Right. Okay, so this is a national campaign. It's not just about Black men. And as a matter of fact, when I hear the term toxic masculinity, a Black man is not what comes to mind. But I'm intentional about my thoughts, and I'm intentional about understanding the unconscious and how my brain impacts what I see, what I feel, what I think. So one of the things I think that we need to understand is that Black men have to project a certain persona, if you will, when they enter into daily society. One of the things when I took a diversity and inclusion course was that the instructor stated that there is not a day that goes by that he doesn't recognize that he's a Black man operating within this society. And there was a white man in the class with me, and he said he never thought about his race when he went about his day. That was dynamic. That was a profound statement for me, because Black men understand how they're perceived when they go out into the world. And there's a certain amount of assertion, if you will, that they have to project in order to survive in a society that oppresses them. I get that. What we cannot do is that we can't marginalize the issues within our community. We can't marginalize what happens. And yes, murderers are murderers, but when you have Black women that are harmed 3 times as much, and oftentimes it's, when I'm talking about the intimate partner violence, it's relationships. And a lot of that frustration is born out of, like you said, Eli, poverty. I don't disagree with you. It's born out of frustration. It's born out of mental illness. So we need to begin to acknowledge that these issues exist in our community, and I think that they will begin to go away. Now, I will actually concede.
Yeah, let me ask you something real quick, if I could. I'm sorry. Let me ask you something real quick, because you and I have had this same discussion, and Eli just mentioned it with you again. You kind of gave credence to what he had to say, but I want to be real particular here, because it's just something, again, to push thought out there. So, like you said, 3 times higher for Black women. But as he brought the context, and you and I have had this very discussion before, and I said to you, it's not that stat is not correct culturally or by race. It's not that it's incorrect. But as he said, if we, in a sense, look at the overall numbers, that we tend to be poor, and we know that, unfortunately, this is not a Black person thing, but we just know that poor people commit more crimes. And so it ends up, if we tend to be more poor, then the 3 times higher doesn't become particular to the race. It becomes the economic factor that we talk. You and I have had that specific conversation.
Right, and I think
it's only fair
that
we bring that out. Right, and I agree that you have. I'm just really putting it together because we had lost you. Yeah, you
Right.
did. I'm saying you did. I'm saying you absolutely did that. You absolutely did that. So I'm acknowledging it. I'm actually honing in on it just for somebody. I'm just honing in on it to kind of further discuss it. Go ahead, Queen. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So I just did bring it up, and I was actually going to say that I actually, having thought about it, because I have a Facebook group, Dialogue on Black Women, where I deal with the stereotypes associated with Black women. So I'm actually going to concede here that you're absolutely right. We should not call it toxic masculinity, because while because of the work that I do, I don't see a black face when I see toxic masculinity. I see white supremacists. When I hear the term toxic masculinity, I recognize the fact that that's because of the work that I do. So I will acknowledge that there needs to be a different way to acknowledge these behaviors that does not stereotype or place black men in an aggressive box. I acknowledge that. So I thank you for bringing that awareness to me, because I can't be focused on stereotypes about black women and be fair not doing the same thing with black men. So I acknowledge that. I can see that. But we do have to address
that's strong.
the mental health issues.
And that's not our reason. No, absolutely. And that's not our, while we're here, we're just doing the dialogue and it's coming out. And if you have different thoughts, if you disagree with, no, I'm talking about you. I'm just kind of sharing it to the audience now. Yeah, absolutely. Of course. That's, again, that's why I bring on smart people. Both of you are intelligent, understand your point. Y'all are both making amazing points. And that's what I attempt to do. Y'all can handle this even better than I can. But what I'm kind of now mentioning to the audience, for anybody that may, still feel the way they feel, that's fine. Please, we got another break. This break, I used to do this at the end of the show, but I particularly chose to do it in for the last segment, because we're about to hear a spoken word poem that I think brings a lot of this in context, and I want to hear both of y'all thoughts in reference to this spoken word poem for this last break. You listen to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. But all I ask is that you think.
I am a man. Please do not expect too much of me, for in the morning there will only be disappointment in its place. I am a man. I collect heartbeats and heavy breath like dollar bills while tossing I love you like loose change and receipt paper. I don't need that. You see, I am a man. I'll refer to you as a girl from the bar with the tongue ring, because I will not be able to recall your name, your body. On the other hand, I will remember perfectly like I am the God who forged it. Your face is simply a memento safety pin to a space on my calendar. Your taste will be on my teeth until dinner time the following day. I am a man. Torturer, noosing women from the snare of my lips while my tongue acts as a whip, lashing my desires across her whiplash curves. There I call it slavery. There I call it love. There I try to say that I'm not like all the others, because the history of women tries to tell them to rely on the words of a man. But I'm a split-tongued, two-faced master of language. I am the cause with no regards for the effects. I am a murderer. A murderer with clean hands, but don't get me wrong, I don't mind getting down and dirty. My body count seems to hold more importance than my GPA in my room. You will find souvenirs and picture IDs in the drawer in the closet. There's dirty laundry that does not belong to me under my bed. You will find bloody sheets, a camera, memories to match, but no bodies to be found, because they said walk the earth today. You see, they sit in classrooms, cry in bathrooms with my aftermath on their sleeves. The only thing they hate more than me is themselves. The only thing I love more than myself is the power that they are giving me. So serial killer, tell me how many there's been so far. Tell me why you thought it was okay to speak to her with tear gas on your breath and words drenched in gasoline. Tell me, did she like it when you loved her with clenched fists instead of open arms? Tell me, did you like it when you loved her with clenched fists instead of open arms? Tell me, who declared you God? Who gave you the right to walk around wearing other people's happiness like dog tags? Tell me, who declared you God, because you are nothing more than human. Nothing more than a mere man with faulty faith in an outdated value system. So don't you dare walk around all high and mighty like we could dig for gold in your chest, like she was born to be at your feet. Don't you dare speak to her like target practice. Don't you dare love her like you know you shouldn't. Love her with no brakes, no airbags, just faith. Treat her like she is the last person on earth that you will ever meet. Speak to her like words are currency. You see, you are no man. See, men should not break more than they do build. See, men should not fight more than they do cry. You see, you, my friend, you are no man. And if you ever try to convince me that you are, I'd much rather be a fool.
Welcome back to the Mental Dialogue Talk Show. I'm your host, Montoya Smith, a.k.a. Black Socrates, along with special guest co-host Patrice Ross, special guest Eli Marcus. Toxic Masculinity, Real or BS. So we hear a spoken word piece that breaks down that subset, that subculture that we've went back and forth about what we're going to call it. We all, in a sense, agreed that it exists. And the young man ends it with, hey, if these are the things you're doing, you're not a man at all. And so when we get into this concept of this last break of talking solution, I will offer that there are many of us, myself included, that grew up learning terrible definitions of manhood that included all the things you heard. Not that I did all those things, but I'm just saying very aware that included a lot of the things you heard in that poem as far as how some men go about their business, and the young man ends the poem saying, you're not a man at all. And that's something that is part of the solution, in my opinion, is ensuring that we have more young men raised with the concept that is the exact opposite of that poem. I'm hoping to share a little back and forth that I had with another brother on Facebook, but I'm going to let you both jump in. We may not get to that because I think a bigger solution is, and I'll say this and I'll let y'all both jump in, a bigger solution in raising that group of boys, which I couldn't imagine that anyone's disagreeing with that part. I think the best way to do that is within a family structure, because trying to capture it in the current state, well, one of our callers mentioned that, in a sense, we have, too many men who maybe are not at home. It becomes difficult to capture that outside of family structure. So that's one idea that I would offer as a solution. Eli, I'll start with you.
Thank you, sir. Well, I just want to say that I do believe that, well, first of all, I appreciate our dear sister's intellectual honesty, level-headedness, level-mindedness, great conversation. I just have nothing but good things, and I always agree with her fundamentally since the beginning of this dialogue. Now, with that said, the solution to these issues, to these trauma conversations, to me, is being more wealth and power focused. We should think for ourselves and stop using the oppressor's body of work to define ourselves. Again, as I said earlier, intelligent cultures don't allow foreign cultures to invent and impose terms like toxic masculinity on their people. Intelligent cultures handle their issues in-house and invent their own terms and solutions to their own problems. I implore you, listen to the way some people are structuring their sentences. We don't even use the word criminal when discussing a criminal act. We replace it altogether with black man. This is social conditioning to criminalize and demonize black men, and it is incredibly dangerous. And I think we all, in some way or another, agree with that. But being more wealth and power focused is the ultimate solution, not because now I'm noticing black men have taken on a self-hating sort of, they're taking on this language, and they're thinking of themselves as rapists, although they've never raped anyone. On some subconscious level, they're thinking of themselves as violent, although they've never been violent. They're apologizing for crimes and sins they never committed. These are not kings. These are people who have been convinced of their own demonization and criminalization. And if you are a woman and you have sons, I would implore you to take my warning, to reject this culture, reject theology and these academia circles that are targeting black people to put a thought virus in their brain and in their psyche. That's all.
Queen? Hold on one second. Make sure I got you back on. Hold on. I muted you one second.
So,
go ahead,
hello?
Latrice.
So,
yes, you're back on. Sorry.
I would like to say that it's not social conditioning. When I said a black man held a knife to my throat, that's because that's what my brain perceived it to be, and that's what it was. So it's not social conditioning. It's our brain functioning to keep us safe, which is its primary purpose. So if a woman attacked you and raped you, let's just say that happened, then your brain is going to say that a black woman or white woman or Asian woman, whatever race that woman was, raped you. And it will then work to keep you safe by making you weary of the people who meet those characteristics when you encounter them. So that's not social conditioning, that's physiology, that's biology. That's what our brains were designed to do. So when we think about how we resolve this, when we think about what we need to be doing so that this doesn't continue to happen, Black Americans are estimated to be 20% more likely to suffer from mental illness than the rest of the population. And a lot of it has to do with our socioeconomic status as well as the oppressive nature in which we live and breathe and work in every day. But part of that is that we have to begin to have the conversations with our children that it is okay to express your emotions in a safe environment. It is okay to, when the situation calls for it, to cry. Oftentimes we tell our young men, real men don't cry, but they do, because the human body is designed to evoke emotion. And when you repress those emotions, they have to come out. So we have to begin to change the conversation in our homes. We have to begin to, as you mentioned, Montoya, begin to change the conversation about single parenthood, owning that it's a problem. And it is not just a problem that the woman is raising the child on her own. There's a reason why that woman is raising that child on her own. We have to begin to acknowledge that post-traumatic slave disorder does exist, and how do we resolve it so that we can then focus on building wealth and changing our socioeconomic status. But we want to be careful, because when I hear the word toxic masculinity, people like Donald Trump come to mind, so that when we do get to the point where we are socioeconomically empowered, that we don't then begin to exhibit the behaviors of the wealthy that are truly the ones who exhibit the behaviors associated with this term, I see. So that's my perspective. We have to stop shunning or telling our young people that it's not okay to express your emotion, to hold it in. That's what I believe.
No, absolutely. So we got a few more minutes. I'm going to share this back and forth just to give a perspective, because I would offer, as part of this solution, specifically for the African American community, and I love your power and wealth focus, Eli, which I know you will agree with part of what I'm about to say, which is, for the most part, marriage is wealth. And so, of course, I'm going to push the marriage narrative, because I think it is a big part of the fix in ensuring that we have more young men raised up and see how to properly treat, our sisters. And again, I'm not subscribing to the majority of men have an issue. I'm not subscribing to that part at all. But I absolutely acknowledge it in our hip hop culture, and we see that music being a powerful medium, that things do get pushed that are inappropriate, and even those things will seep into even young men who've been raised, quote unquote, right. And have experiences where they go through a period where maybe they're not treating sisters as they should be. Again, I do want to acknowledge it on what I consider appropriate levels, because, again, I've been raised in this hip-hop generation. Let me share this little back and forth right before we go off the air. So I had a sister who ends up asking a brother online this question. I won't use names here because I didn't get permission to. But the question was simply, and again, hopefully people will see how it relates to what I had to say. Actually, let me start with what the brother had to say. He says, how did we get to the point of black women feeling unprotected? How did we get to the point of males leaving the home? We know who is responsible for our condition, but who is accountable of continuing the infection after knowing what systematic dysfunction was passed to us to stay slaves? There are two genders accountable to keep passing this behavior to the future generations, and it takes both looking heavy in the mirror. Her question was, do you feel that black women saying they feel unprotected is blaming black men? His response was, no. As masculine instinct, I see a cry for rescue. Her response was, I personally feel it's a request for restoration. Black women not only want to be rescued from uncomfortable situations, but also want to move safely and freely through their communities on a regular. That's it. My response to this back and forth was simply this. I said to her, Queen, that's a fair request, but like it or not, black women who do feel the protection that you speak of are typically in communities with plenty of marriages around them. This is not to suggest or to act naive about the number of black girls and women who have not been protected inside of two-parent structures as well. However, in order to improve as a culture, we must note the best opportunity to do so is boys and girls being raised with a father at home to show proper treatment of their mother. I understand you think it is a matter of getting more men to understand the black woman's plight. However, in too many cases, you are asking this of men who have no clue about masculine protection. This is not an excuse, but a reality that would not have to be said or discussed had they learned it from their fathers naturally. We could obviously go into that discussion, but thank both of you for being on this morning. Eli, if you have any public information that you'd like to get out, please get it out real quick. We have about 20 seconds. Go ahead, King.
You can follow me on Facebook. Just type in Eli Marcus. Marcus is spelled M-A-R-K-U-S. Eli is spelled how it sounds, E-L-I. That's it.
You're listening to Mental Dialogue. All I ask is that you think. Thank everyone and all the callers. Appreciate y'all.